The rain slid down the windows of St. Michael's Hospital like soft, grieving laments. Inside a quiet office, Dr. Gabriel Muniz, 47 years old, stood frozen, staring at the test results in his hands, printed in stark black ink. Stage 4, adenocarcinoma, inoperable. But it wasn't just any patient. It was his younger sister, Estella, a mother of 2 small children. Gabriel's mind, trained to contain emotion, now faltered. For the first time in years, he felt a depth of emptiness no amount of medical knowledge could touch. That night he returned home in silence. His wife Helena tried to speak to him, but all he could say was, "She's not going to make it." He then locked himself in his study, turned on the desk lamp and stared at the diplomas on the wall, as if searching there for some kind of answer. His faith, long weakened and abandoned, now felt like a cruel joke. Gabriel was a man of science, and science had nothing left to offer. The next day, despite exhaustion, he saw patients as usual, showing no trace of emotion. An elderly man with advanced lymphoma took his hand and said, "You're a good doctor, but your eyes are empty." The words pierced Gabriel like an arrow. It was true. Inside, he had died alongside his sister's diagnosis. That evening, while driving home, he passed a small chapel he'd never paid much attention to. On impulse, he parked and walked inside. Only one person was there, an elderly nun kneeling in prayer, her eyes closed. As he walked past her, he clearly heard her whisper, "Mary, go ahead of us." The voice was weak, but it rang through him like it was meant just for him. Gabriel stopped, turned around. The nun simply looked at him with calmness in her gaze. "Say it every time you're afraid," she told him. He said nothing. He sat on a bench at the back of the chapel, more out of fatigue than belief, and stayed there, motionless. The words echoed in his mind, strangely familiar. "Mary, go ahead of us." Over the next few days, that same phrase began to appear in unsettling ways. He turned on the TV one morning and came across a Catholic broadcast where the priest ended the homily with, "When you don't know what to do, say, 'Mary, go ahead of us.'" At the hospital, a patient accidentally dropped a rosary, wrapped in a tiny folded paper with the same prayer printed on it. Later, in the car, a quiet hymn came on the radio with the refrain, "She walks ahead and crushes the head of the serpent." Gabriel didn't know if he was losing his mind, or if this was some kind of spiritual coincidence. He began to suffer from insomnia. Night after night, he watched religious testimonies on YouTube, something completely unthinkable for him just a week before. One particular video deeply moved him, a man who had survived terminal cancer after consecrating his life to Our Lady of Fatima. Gabriel slammed his laptop shut in frustration. It was fantasy, he told himself. He knew how cancer worked. He knew the end. On Friday evening, Helena found Gabriel sitting on the floor in the children's bedroom, holding an old rosary he didn't even remember owning. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He looked at her like a lost boy. "I just want a real chance to save Estella." Helena hugged him tightly. "Then ask, even if you don't believe." Her words carried the weight of a quiet confession of faith, and for the first time, Gabriel closed his eyes and whispered, "Mary, go ahead of us." Saturday passed in near silence. He took Estella for more scans. Her body looked thinner, her eyes dimmer. On the way home, he passed by the chapel again. The same nun was there, in the same place. When she saw him, she smiled gently and said, "You already know who to call. She will come." Gabriel didn't quite understand what she meant, or maybe deep down, he did. At 2:57 a.m. on Sunday morning, Gabriel awoke with his heart racing. Something felt wrong. The room was colder than usual. A strange breeze crept in under the door. And then, the digital clock flipped to 3 a.m., the hour of mercy, the hour of the soul. He sat up, and there, standing in the doorway of the bedroom, was a woman. Gabriel blinked several times, hoping to undo what he was seeing. In the threshold stood a tall woman, enveloped in a softly glowing white mantle, which shimmered faintly in the darkness. Her silhouette was distinct, though her face remained partly veiled in shadow. She had a serene presence, firm, maternal, radiant. A gentle blue light from the hallway illuminated her figure with almost unbearable peace. She didn't speak aloud, and yet he heard her. "Do not be afraid, I wear white for the light of my son." Gabriel froze. His breathing faltered. His heart pounded with a rhythm he had never known, not even during his most critical medical emergencies. The woman stepped forward. A movement made no sound. Time seemed suspended. He tried to call out, but only tears streamed down his face, and then she raised her right arm and spoke again. I am the mother, and the mother what takes care of everything. The words didn't come from her mouth. They came from within him, as though they had been sown deep in his spirit long ago. Suddenly, a wave of warmth surged through his chest and spread across his entire body. It was not a physical fire, but something interior, pure, consuming, cleansing. The woman extended her luminous mantle and draped it over him. The moment it touched his shoulders, his entire being felt aflame, not with pain, but with a peace so profound it shattered him. Gabriel collapsed to his knees. The weight of an entire lifetime came crashing down. He wept as he never had before, for Estella, for his late mother, for the patients he couldn't save, for the coldness he had carried for years, for all the times he had denied God. He cried without understanding, and yet somehow with complete certainty, it was real. The woman didn't vanish, she simply faded, like mist in the air. The room was left in a sacred silence, not empty, but full, a silence of peace. Gabriel stayed on the floor for over an hour, curled like a child returning to the womb of faith. Only at 4 a.m. did his breathing slow. At sunrise, Helena found him asleep on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. When she touched him, he awoke, and the look in his eyes startled her. It was the same light she had seen the day their son was born. She came, he whispered, and nothing more. Helena didn't understand at first. She simply held his hand, and in that touch, something was different. Something new had begun to burn. Later that morning, Gabriel stood at the window in his clinic, opening it to let in the air, and then he heard it, a sound that cut through the morning silence. From the rooftop of the adjacent building, a rare bird, and one not native to the city, was singing a solemn, deep melody. Its voice sounded almost like Gregorian chant. It was strange, unlikely, almost impossible, but there it was. That afternoon, during an emergency shift, Gabriel responded to a sudden cardiac arrest. He moved quickly, performed resuscitation. After several tense minutes, he stabilized the patient. As the man regained consciousness, he reached for Gabriel's coat and, in a delirious but strong voice, whispered, "She showed me your face. She said, 'He will be my hands.'" Gabriel froze. The man didn't know him, couldn't have, and yet he spoke as if they had always known each other. Then something caught Gabriel's eye. The heart monitor. The moment the man's heartbeat returned, the exact time recorded 3 a.m., the same hour, the same moment, the same visitation. Statistically, absurd. Yet it had happened. Gabriel left the hospital and stepped into the evening air. A warm breeze brushed across his face, and for the first time in months, he smiled, not because he understood, but because finally he had stopped resisting. The miracle didn't need logic. It simply was. In the days that followed, Gabriel moved through life as if everything had shifted. The world looked different, sharper, fuller. He could feel his patient's pain now, not observe it, feel it. The quiet of the night no longer scared him. Instead, it whispered truth. And yet, a question lingered. Had it really happened? Or was he losing his mind? On Thursday, he returned to the chapel. He needed answers. In the garden outside, he found the elderly nun watering flowers. "My name is Sister Claire," she told him, smiling. "I was a nurse for 40 years before I gave my life to prayer, and for the last 17 years I've prayed for Mary to go ahead of every doctor in the world." Gabriel felt his throat tighten. "Why did you touch me that day?" She hesitated. "Because she asked me to, and when I did, I knew she would choose you." At that moment, a grey-haired woman in a janitor's uniform walked slowly past them. Her eyes were filled with tears. "I'm sorry, doctor," she said, almost whispering. "But I saw her that night. I saw her leave your room, and the light wasn't human." Gabriel stood completely still. "You saw her?" She nodded. "I've had visions since I was young, but I've never seen light like that. It was like fire, but it didn't burn." The weight of her words was so great that Gabriel had to sit down. Sister Claire looked at him and said softly, "Now you understand. It was never just about you." That night at home, Gabriel told Helena what he had heard, about the janitors, vision about Sister Claire's prayer. Helena listened quietly, then she took a deep breath. "There's something I never told you," she said. 2 nights ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. There was a light in our room. You were sleeping, but someone was standing beside you. A man, tall, wearing white. He touched your forehead and smiled at me." Gabriel stared at her, stunned. What did his face look like? Helena described it, exactly like the image of the divine mercy of Jesus that Gabriel had seen earlier that week at the hospital. She had never seen that image before. "I wasn't afraid," she said. "I felt peace, and I had the strange impression that he was saying, 'Now he knows me.'" The next morning, Gabriel visited Estella's hospital room. She was awake, her eyes bright in a way he hadn't seen in months. "Gabriel," she said softly, "had a strange dream. A woman in a flowing white-blue mantle when she covered me with it, and she said I didn't have to fight alone anymore." Gabriel swallowed hard. "Do you remember what else she said?" Estella closed her eyes for a moment. She said, "Pain is just a bridge. Healing is on the other side." Tears rolled down Gabriel's face. It was her, the same voice. From that day forward, Estella's recovery accelerated so rapidly that the doctors started questioning the original diagnosis. Her scans showed a steady, unexplained reduction in the tumor. One of the lead oncologists called Gabriel into his office, eyes wide. "I don't know what you did, but this isn't medicine. We can't explain this." That Sunday, Gabriel went to Mass with his entire family. It was the first time he had entered a church with sincere intention since his mother's funeral. When he knelt down, a wave of warmth traveled through his spine. He looked up at the altar, and there it was, a folded white mantle with soft blue trim draped gently over the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. The parish was unknowingly celebrating the upcoming feast of May 13th, the day of her first apparition. Gabriel closed his eyes, and in the deep silence of the church he heard her voice again, but now, from within, "I am the mother, and the mother takes care of everything." He was no longer alone. That week, Gabriel no longer slept as he used to. It wasn't insomnia. It was a new kind of vigil. He would spend hours in silent prayer, walking softly through the house while his children slept, holding the same old rosary he had found days before. He still felt her mantle, invisible but present, as if wrapped around his shoulders, and inside a quiet certainty grew. Something in him had died, so that something far greater could be born. He made a silent but definitive decision to consecrate his life to the Mother of God. He began studying the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima, the lives of the Church's physician saints, and dove into Scripture like it was a long-lost love letter. The words no longer felt like ink on paper. They felt alive. They burned gently in his chest. On the night of his consecration, Gabriel drove alone to a small Marian shrine in rural Pennsylvania, a quiet chapel surrounded by trees. It reminded him of visiting churches with his grandmother as a child, of silent pews, of flickering candles. He carried with him a handwritten letter confessing all the mistakes he had made, as a doctor, as a brother, as a husband. He left the letter at the foot of the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, knelt down, and pressed his forehead to the ground. He prayed without words, only surrender. When he rose again, he felt light, new free back at the hospital. People noticed the change. Gabriel began visiting patients even when he wasn't assigned to their care. He would sit with them, ask about their families, hold their hands, pray, if they wanted. One terminal leukemia patient looked at him with watery eyes and said, "You remind me of one of the apostles. There's fire in your eyes." Gabriel smiled gently, but deep down he knew he was no longer alone inside himself. One morning, a young man with advanced lymphoma refused further treatment. Gabriel sat with him for over an hour. He didn't mention chemotherapy. He spoke about the mother. He told him what had happened. The young man cried, and then said he wanted to keep fighting. Days later, as his scans showed unexpected improvement, the boy whispered to Gabriel, "It was her. I felt her. The day you told me. She touched me." At home, his relationship with Helena began to bloom again. She looked at him not only with admiration, but with a quiet reverence. "You're different," she would say. And Gabriel would reply, "It's not me, it's her living in me." They began praying the rosary together with their children. One evening, after prayers, their youngest, only 6 years old, Alice said softly, "Daddy, I dreamed of a lady in a glowing white dress. She hugged me and said she loves you." Gabriel broke down. Right there on the living room floor, he wept, not from sadness, but from a love he had never known, a love that didn't have to be earned, just received. And for the first time, he understood the purpose of medicine, not just to cure bodies, but to care for souls, to be present, to hold space, to love when nothing else could be done. A month later, Gabriel gave a talk to a group of medical residents. The topic, spirituality in medicine, something he once would have called delusional. He spoke of compassion, of silence, of what it meant to sit with someone at the edge of the unknown. After the session, a young doctor approached him and said, "If all doctors were like you, no one would be afraid to die." That night, Gabriel stood on his back porch. The sky was clear. A single shooting star traced a silver path across the dark sky. He closed his eyes and said, "Thank you for the pain, for the breaking, for the despair," because all of it had led him to her. And then, as if carried on the wind, he heard one final whisper, "My son, now you care for others, as I care for you." 3 months had passed since the apparition. Time felt slower now. Life called for contemplation, not noise. Gabriel walked through the hospital with a new pace, more present, more at peace. Some patients began calling him the doctor who prays. Others said his presence changed the room. He didn't accept the praise. He simply smiled, because he knew it wasn't about him. It was about her. Estella was now in full remission. Her scans showed no trace of disease. The doctors called it a rare response, but Gabriel knew it wasn't a response, it was a calling. One day he found a letter on his desk. No name, neat handwriting, simple paper. "Dr. Gabriel, you didn't just save my body, you saved my faith. Thank you for showing me the mother. Now I let her go ahead of me too." He kept the letter with reverence. He knew that soul had just begun its journey. On the anniversary of the apparition, he returned to the little chapel where it all began. Sister Claire was no longer there. She'd been reassigned, but her bench remained. Gabriel sat quietly. The chapel was empty, but not silent. There was presence. He felt the same soft breeze from that night, and with it, a peace that no longer needed proof. At the altar, the statue of Our Lady of Fatima seemed to look straight at him, and for the first time, he didn't cry. He smiled. A quiet smile of someone who now knows that even the deepest wounds can be the doorway to new life. Outside, on the steps, a young boy was selling white roses. Gabriel bought one and placed it at the feet of the statue. He whispered his final prayer like a child speaking to his mother. "Please take care of me, so I never forget how it all began." And he walked away, slowly, in peace, knowing that, since that night, he never walked alone again. Some stories aren't told to be understood. They're told to be felt. Gabriel Muniz's story is one of those. A man shaped by science, hardened by loss, brought to his knees in the darkest night of the soul, and reached by a presence, a woman, a mantle, a look that cut through reason and pierced the heart. He never asked for miracles. He asked for meaning, and meaning came like a breeze at 3 a.m., a fire that doesn't burn, a voice without sound. "I am the mother," and the mother takes care of everything. Throughout his journey, Gabriel discovered that healing isn't only in medicine, but in mercy, that the greatest miracles don't always defy physics. They soften hearts of stone. He saw skeptics kneel. He saw his sister bloom. He saw the dying find peace, and most of all, he saw himself reborn, not in a different body, but in the same one, now inhabited by faith. The phrase, "Mary, go ahead of us," was no longer a prayer. It was a road, an invisible path carving light through despair. He recognized her in every small act, in the embrace of a hopeless patient, in the brave smile of a child battling cancer, in the still silence of a wife who now prayed with him. He learned that the greatest revolutions are silent, and the most powerful miracles begin with surrender. Today, Gabriel is not just a doctor, he is a consecrated man, a servant of the light. And if you're hearing this story, remember, when the pain feels invincible, when the soul bends under the weight, when all seems lost, she appears at 3 a.m. with her radiant mantle and a love with no end, and she says, "One last time, my child, the mother cares, always." Amen. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next story.